we've determined the cycle time for this job and the duty cycle and peak force and basically the force patterns. We'd like to know whether this is going to be excessively fatiguing before we actually bring workers in to start work. The good news is we've got some resources that can help us with this. So let's return to the Canvas site under assignments, and we'll go to resources and exercises by topic, and we'll go to the top of this where we have all of our resources, and I've been putting the links to the videos and tools that we'll use for this class, and we'll scroll down here to fatigue allowances, and you'll recognize this website because this is where we got the fatigue models that we use to determine or estimate how long somebody could carry the suitcase and how long they could work before they reached exhaustion or before they began to experience discomfort. And we talked a little bit about differences among different parts of the body. Well, now we're going to talk about a little different kind of work. We're going to talk about repetitive work in which workers perform an exertion followed by a period of rest, followed maybe by another exertion, another period of rest before they complete a cycle. And if you looked at the reading material I gave you that goes with this section, you will probably recognize this case packing operation because this is described in some detail. And actually I'm going to scroll down here just a little bit and show you what the force pattern looks like for this. What you'll see here is that we have a series of exertions. The worker gets and erects a case, and then some larger exertions followed by some periods of waiting while they actually put product into the case, and then some quick exertions to push the case aside into a taping machine. Now, this is more detailed than what we can really manage with our models. So what we'll do is we're going to simplify this job by characterizing it as a period of work followed by periods of rest. And what we'll do is we'll calculate the time-weighted average of the forces that are greater than 7% to get an average force, and we'll then calculate also the time at which that force is maintained, and then how much recovery time there is between successive exertions. So we can characterize as a period of work, rest, work, rest. And for this operation, we find that the work time was 7.4 seconds, and the average force during that time was 29%. We find that the recovery time between successive exertions was 18.3 seconds. If you add these together, you get the cycle time of 25.7. If you use the T work and T cycle, you can calculate the duty cycle of 29%. And it's totally a coincidence that the percent MVC and the percent duty cycle are the same. And I'll just give you a heads up, it's really easy to get confused between percent duty cycle and percent MVC. And then we'll talk about allowances later, and sometimes we get confused because we talk about allowances as percents. So we got percents all over the place. So if it sounds like I misspoke myself, there's a good chance that I did. So be patient. Now, in the same way that we had fatigue curves for static exertions, we have fatigue curves for intermittent exertions. But instead of having endurance, we've got percent duty cycle. And what we have is percent MVC versus percent duty cycle. And as you might expect, as the percent MVC increases, the acceptable duty cycle decreases, or vice versa. Now, we can either take the percent MVC and find an acceptable duty cycle, or we can take the percent duty cycle and find the acceptable percent MVC. And you can do this graphically, but it's, I've given you some calculators here on the web page. So if you come down here and plug in your duty cycle of 29%, just put 29, this only accepts integers, sorry, and click the button below that, it'll tell you the acceptable or the maximum recommended percent MVC for this duty cycle is 24%, and our duty cycle we said was 29%, so this is exceeds the recommended limits. And if we do the same thing down here for acceptable duty cycle, we put in the observed percent MVC, which is again 29%. This tells us that the acceptable duty cycle for this operation, the maximum acceptable duty cycle, would be 21%, which again is below what we observe. So either way, the job would be considered excessively fatiguing. Now we can go a step further with this, and it actually will help us calculate how much additional recovery time would be required to prevent fatigue or to keep us within those limits. So the percent MVC again was 29%. I'll enter that. The work time was 7.4, and let's see, the rest time 7.4, not 75, and the rest time between those periods of exertion was 18.3. And so I enter the numbers and click the button, and it tells me that it calculates the duty cycle of 29%, which we knew. The duty cycle that's recommended should be less than 21%, and the total recommended recovery time should be at least 28 seconds. This means we need at least another 9.5 seconds to bring us within these limits. Okay. This 9.5 would become our fatigue allowance and would need to be added to our normal time to calculate a standard time. You may also recall that sometimes this allowance may be expressed as a percentage of the work time or as a percentage of the total time. What's important is that we add the 9.5 seconds to the 9.5 second rest allowance to the normal time. So now let's go back and look at our example we've been working on. And again, we've calculated these the cycle time and the duty cycle and the percent MVC based on our pretty much a theoretical analysis of this job and what we know about the stiffness of the springs and so forth. So actually we have these fatigue equations, or the TLV fatigue equations, built into the spreadsheet, so you don't actually have to go back to the website to calculate these. In fact, they're already calculated here for us. So the maximum percent MVC for this duty cycle that would be considered acceptable would be 21%. Okay, and our maximum MVC was 53%, which is clearly well in excess of the recommended limits. Our maximum duty cycle for this percent MVC would be 4%, which is far less than the 37% that we observed. So we definitely need more recovery time in this operation. And it actually calculates this for us. If I scroll in the right direction, we can see the results here. So it tells us that we need an additional recovery time here of 247 mods, and that's versus presently the cycle time is only 27 mods. So that means we need about 9 times as much recovery time, additional recovery time, as we have total work time. And I can tell you that probably would not be acceptable to most employers because that would drive up their cost of manufacturing. The good news is that there's probably some things that we can do to reduce the force rather than trying to increase the recovery time. And that is your goal for the part 2 of this exercise.